Training camp is here. We're getting excited for the start of another season. What are the expectations for this Broncos squad? Will a 7-year playoff drought finally come to an end this year? We're diving in on Countdown to Camp. Hello, welcome into the studio. I am Phil Milani alongside Mr. Hoff, Steve Atwater. We'll be joined by Eric Dalala and Sidney Jones in just a minute. But Steve, we're talking about expectations for this Broncos team. What are you most looking forward to?
Man, I'm most looking forward to training camp and really.
Come on, Steve.
I am.
Training camp?
I'm looking forward to being able to see who can play and who can't play. Because right now, there are a lot of guys who we think can play, but hey, we haven't seen them play at this level. And once I get a good look, I'll have it only takes me about a week. And I can tell you some guys, hey, he's probably not going to make it. He's got a great chance of making it if he stays healthy. But the guy's got to come back in shape, ready to go with the right mindset and, ready to work.
Yeah, it always amazes me that first day in practice. I'm like, we're seeing some football here. What about expectations for this team? Steve, I think that we talked about optimism with Sean Payton coming in here, working with Russell Wilson. What do you think? How's this thing going to look?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think most people who haven't been able to see the guys work, I think that they will probably have their expectations tempered this year because last year everybody was so hyped. I was hyped too last year. I mean, I bought it all. I bought in 100%. But seeing how these guys are working, seeing Sean Payton interact with them, seeing his leadership, seeing how they're buying in, and Sidney and Eric had mentioned it on a previous show about how fast these guys are running down on the kickoff team, and it's June. That's really impressive to me, and it makes me feel like they're on a different path than they were last year.
Definitely the culture and the tone around the building has changed, Steve. And if you look at on paper, last year, so many injuries. There were a lot of close games the Broncos lost, 1-point games, overtime games. Some of these little things, they start to add up. If those go the other way, this Broncos team could be pretty good.
Yeah, they could be, and you're right. We had a lot of games that were decided within 7 points, and Sean Payton is a big proponent, big believer in doing the small things right. And until you get those small things right, you can never have success on a larger level. And but fortunately, they've been working on that. He's been making the players aware of that early on. So once the season comes, they've heard it time and time again. Make sure you're watching the ball. You're not jumping off sides. Those types of things will come back to bite you in the end. But the way we're headed now, I think that we're going to be much improved in the penalties area, and that's going to help us win some ball games.
Yeah, well, you heard Sean Payton talking about those penalties. He looked sick talking about them up there. He was like, I don't even want to tell you about it. So, just the little things, I think, adding up. We'll see if it all comes together. I think this Broncos team, who knows what's possible for this squad coming up in 2023. Hey, let's send it over to Sidney Jones and Eric Dalala. Guys, what are your realistic expectations here?
Well, Phil, I think back to February during Sean Payton's introductory press conference, he was asked about what his expectations are for the season and, how he plans to come in and turn this team around. And, I liked what he said. He said it's realistic for this fan base, to expect a different culture, a change there. It's realistic for this fan base to expect this team to win. But when it comes to predictions, it's so hard because there's so many different things that can happen.
Yeah, that's what makes it tricky. Yeah. I do think that part of this offseason has been about work and not about talk. So a little bit disingenuous to come up here and guarantee 12, 13 wins. I do think back to that same intro press conference, Sidney, when Sean Payton said that his first season in New Orleans, he walked into the locker room after the third preseason game and said, this team is terrible. We're not going to win a single game this year. They win 10-6. They went to the NFC Championship. That's a pretty far cry from not winning a single game. And so it's clear that that change can happen pretty quickly. I think the Saints definitely had a losing record the year before Sean Payton got to New Orleans. So you can see a quick turnaround. who knows if that means winning the division, if that means getting back to the playoffs for the first time since the Broncos won Super Bowl 50. I would say there's a few goals here, though. One is play competitive, meaningful games in December and January. The Broncos have only done that once here over the last few years. You've got to get back to that. And the way you do it is by being more disciplined, by being better on offense, by keeping that same defensive standard, and by not beating yourself. I think when you look at some of the best teams year in and year out around the NFL and the best coaches, I always think of how Pittsburgh and New England can always seemingly do something with not a lot. And they don't beat themselves in those crucial moments. They just play fundamental, sound, smart football, and they end up on the winning side more often than not. I think Sean Payton's going to bring that same thing here to Denver. And Phil, you mentioned those one-score games. I think, Sydney, that's going to put the Broncos with that Sean Payton touch, that Sean Payton effect. They're going to be on the right side of those more often than not.
So you're telling me we have a chance of going to the AFC Championship then, Eric?
I guess so. I mean, if we're looking at history.
Phil, Steve, we'll send it back to you.
Hey, why stop at AFC Championship? Well,
Let's go all the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Go all the way, baby.
I mean, why stop there? Steve, talking about that though, 7 years here for the playoff drought for the Broncos.
Yeah.
Not what fans have grown accustomed to around here for sure. We're sick and tired of seeing the Chiefs
Sick and tired of being sick and tired.
What's that first step? I mean, it starts in training camp here with the Broncos putting in that work, but what's that first step to get him back in the mix?
Yeah, well, I would say the first step was getting Sean Payton, a great leader. And I would say what the next step is the leaders on the football team, the players, the Justin Simmons, the Russell Wilsons, deciding that this team is going to be a team that's committed to work. We're committed to learning from each other and committed to leading these guys with respect. And once everybody is bought into those leaders, hey, it's going to be a lot easier path for them. Got to put a lot of work in, but it's going to be much easier.
That's interesting you mentioned the leaders there. It all can't come from Sean Payton, right?
100%,
I mean,
no.
It needs to be in the locker room.
Yes, got to be in the locker room. Got to have guys who aren't afraid to speak their minds. But I say this many times, that you have to speak your mind, but you got to be respectful. You know, these are grown men, and they don't take disrespect too well. So you got to lead, but you got to lead with respect.
It is tough, though, thinking about it, just because you know that Mahomes is still there. Justin Herbert, another year there with the Chargers. Both those teams made the playoffs, obviously, last year. The Raiders are getting better, but, hey, the Broncos are getting better, too.
Yeah, and you can't look at what they're doing over there. The only thing you can control is what you're doing and making sure that as an offense, you're going to be explosive as possible. And as a defense, you can stop anybody. I don't care who you're up against.
So you don't look at the rest of the
Can't worry about it. And obviously, you know.
It's about us.
Obviously, yeah, on game week, you're going to look at a bunch of film. You're going to be prepared. But in the big scheme of things, they can't stop us. We're the only ones that can really stop us.
I love it, Steve. You got me fired up. You ready to go?
Let's go, Phil. Let's go.
Training camp is here. You can feel football is in the air, and we're ready to see them out on the field here. So I hope you enjoyed this Countdown to Camp series. For Sidney Jones and Eric Talala, the Hall of Famer Steve Atwater, it's been a pleasure hanging out on the desk with you, Steve.
Same here always, Phil.
It's always fun. Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
I am Phil Milani. This has been Countdown to Camp.